What's going on? Welcome into the Bills Chat halftime show, the last regular season halftime show of the season. Also, most likely, the last game ever at Highmark Stadium as the Bills lead the Jets by a score of 21 to nothing. Even though the Bills followed suit of what the Texans did in the second half against the Colts, what the Chargers were doing coming into today, they are playing a large majority of their backups. They are still going up and down the field on the Jets, who have mustered 63 yards in the first half. The Jets have absolutely quit on Aaron Glenn, and it does make you wonder what his future will hold. That is not our problem to deal with. I think what's on the mind of most fans, along with the nostalgia of the last game at Highmark and saying goodbye to the stadium potentially, I know there's still a chance that the 7 seed could come to Buffalo, is what does this all mean for the playoffs? Well, because the Houston Texans did defeat the Indianapolis Colts at 1, that means that the Bills can no longer get the 5 seed. So they are now left with either the 6 or the 7 seed. Because this game is going the way it's going, and because the Chargers are currently down to the Broncos, last time I checked that, they were only down by 10. It is 10-0. The Chargers are driving late in the first half. So maybe they make it a one-score game. It does seem like we are headed for the 6 seed. Beyond that, if you want to go ahead and assume that the Chargers are gonna lose to the Broncos, which might be dangerous. The Broncos have lost their outstanding left tackle, Garrett Bowles, to what might be a massive injury heading before the playoffs, and they're only up by 1 score. But if you wanna assume that's a victory, then that would put the Broncos at the 1 seed, and then it really comes down to New England, Miami. That game for a New England team that's playing a Dolphins team that's playing without Devon Achane, without Tua, obviously, without Jalen Waddle, they're only up by a score of 17 to 10. So Dolphins are hanging around. If the Dolphins were to pull the upset, everything else goes as we expect. If the Dolphins pull the upset, that would knock the Patriots all the way down to the 3 seed, and that would set up a Bills-Patriots matchup in round 1. That's really all that's left that will impact the Bills. Steelers-Ravens tonight is for the 4 seed, but that will not impact the Bills in the first round, as the winner of that game will host the Houston Texans next week. Let's see what everybody's saying in chat. Looks like a trip to Jacksonville. Yeah, Roy, that's where the smart money is. That's where it's kind of been all week long, where when you really watch the way it sets up, barring a massive upset where a team that's not even playing its starters loses to a team that's desperate, it's just hard to see that scenario not playing out. And it lines up with Bills going to Jacksonville. And that's the topic of what Kyle has to say. I'm not scared of Jax. I'm scared of Joe Brady. That is a popular thought, that maybe these Jaguars are a tough matchup for the Bills because they do have excellent run defense. I think the Highmark, I did not see what happened today in the Titans game. If Tony Pollard broke this, I guess I could look it up. But judging by the score, I would be very surprised if he did. But I'm going to go ahead and check it while I say this. Coming into today, the Highmark against the Jaguars by a rusher was 75 yards by Jonathan Taylor. Tony Pollard did only get 48 yards on 14 carries today. So that is 75 yards. That's not 120, 130. Now, the Bills do have an excellent run game. I don't think they're going to fear anybody's run defense, but where I am optimistic about this matchup is if it is Bills Jaguars, and boy, we have an entire week to get to it. I promise you, Luca and I are recording post game tonight. We'll maybe do like 2 minutes on Bills Jets, and the rest of the show is going to be already talking about the playoff matchup, the playoff field, everything from there. So I promise we got you. But just on the outset, the Jaguars do not get great pass rush. I do think that will benefit the Bills, and I am curious to see what the Bills under center pass game looks like against the Jaguars. My read on the Jaguars, just sitting here without really diving into them yet, but having watched them fairly closely this year, is they're good at almost everything. I don't think they're great at anything. So you can take that any which way you want it. They're a solid all-around team, maybe the most balanced team in the entire AFC, but I'm not sure what they're great at. And you know, the Bills are great at having Josh Allen, and that, you know, maybe that's enough. We shall see. I saw some early lines for that game. The Bills go into it favored by 1.5 points sitting here today, so we'll see how that goes. Kyle says it's funny we can't get the ball to wide receivers even against the Jets. I guess we can take a look at some stats here. I know Gabe Davis had a catch early. I'm not really tracking stats too much in this game just because of the circumstances in the game. Mitch Trubisky, have yourself a day, kid. 15 of 19, 169, and 2 touchdowns on the day. And then Kincaid has 3 catches for 48 yards. Gabe Davis, 3 for 30. Other receivers getting involved. Josh Palmer, 1 for 1. Keon Coleman with a donut on the day. So, yeah, to your point, the receivers are not really getting involved. I thought maybe the most interesting storyline, other than Josh Allen playing the first snap and getting out of there, which we all saw coming just to continue his start streak, was the fact that Dalton Kincaid was active and up and playing in this game. My read on that is because he's missed the last 2 weeks of action, they probably wanted to ramp him up and get some of the rust knocked off. I think normal folks like us completely underestimate just how taxing it is on the human body to play an NFL football game. Not just catch a ball and get tackled, but sprinting every play, getting warmed up, getting yourself in that mindset, putting on the pads. I don't think they wanted Dalton Kincaid's first time in almost a month to be in a playoff game. So I think ramping him up in the first half, getting a couple of balls thrown his way, seeing how his body reacts to that was a smart move. And I would be shocked if he plays the rest of this game. It seems like they avoided any kind of injury there. Roy Collins with, let's hope Henry doesn't go off later and Cook gets the rushing title. So yeah, Jonathan Taylor, the rushing title, I'm glad you brought that up, Roy. Jonathan Taylor did not do enough in the first game to catch James Cook. In this game, James Cook, who is done for the day, I assume, has 2 carries for 15 yards. And that puts, I don't have the exact number in front of me. I think Derrick Henry's down by like 150 yards. That's certainly in his wheelhouse, in his bag of outcomes. But that puts James Cook in a very comfortable position. And I think that was a tricky one for the Bills. We know they'd like the rushing title. I couldn't even tell you who was the rushing title winner from last year, a year before, whatever. But I never needed James Cook to go out there and get 15 carries to try to win the rushing title. If Derrick Henry goes for 200 yards tonight and gets the rushing title, tip your cap. Congratulations. We need James Cook healthy for this playoff run, and him getting 2 carries for 15 and getting out of the game is a perfect scenario for me. Kyle says, we'll need to score against Jack. Sounds like John Madden, but we're not winning that game 13-10. Jacksonville's offense is well balanced. I think the Jakobi Meyers trade really unlocked a lot for that offense. They did lose Travis Hunter, who was a dynamic offensive and defensive player for them midseason. But Brian Thomas Jr. is such a question mark for them because last year he looked like he was going to become the next receiver in that conversation with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, the upper echelon of the NFL. And this season, it has just not happened for him. A lot of drops, a lot of concentration errors. And really, when Jakobi Meyers came over from the Raiders at the trade deadline, Jakobi Meyers became the number one, and Brian Thomas got relegated to a complimentary role, and he really hasn't had a blow-up game. So they do have a solid tight end in Brenton Strange, solid running back in Travis Etienne. He's nothing special. He's got good speed, good offensive line, solid all-around defense. And, the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, I think he's a lot like a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL where he can get hot, but I don't know that you want to count on it. We haven't ever really seen him perform in a big spot. And, Kyle mentions Parker Washington, another nice receiver for them. They certainly have better receivers than the Bills. I don't know if that's a benchmark for anybody to be striving for, but they will have the better receivers next week. Watching Keon Coleman work is actually funny. It's depressing to me. This is a Bills team just begging for anybody to make plays at wide receiver. It seems to me that sitting here right now, the Bills' number one wide receiver is Brandon Cooks. Now, you can roll your eyes, you can laugh at that, but he is the most well-rounded receiver on this team. For better or worse, he's the only guy that can get deep. He's the only guy that can run routes consistently and get open and stress teams down the field. He's inactive today. I think that says a lot about what the Bills think about him, scary or not. From there, Khalil Shakir is in the mix. Joshua Palmer, I think, is going to continue to be important. Tyrell Shavers certainly plays an important role both in the running game, and I think we're starting to see him come on as a big body, 50-50 ball receiver out there. So the Bills have what they have. The most important thing, in my opinion, for their receiver group is Dalton Kincaid healthy, because he's the only real difference-making passing weapon outside of the running backs, who both James Cook and Ty Johnson, I think, can be matchup nightmares in the playoffs. And I do hope, beyond hope, that once the money games start next week, that the Bills show that they have been sitting on that a little bit and ready to unleash it when the games begin. Any team willing to give up a 5th or a 6th for Keon this offseason, if the Bills do go out and make a trade for a receiver, which I don't know if they'll be able to execute it, I do anticipate, Roy, that they will be trying to do that this offseason. It wouldn't stun me in the least if Keon Coleman was a part of that trade. Like if I'm just throwing names out here. If the Cardinals decided, hey, we've seen enough of Marvin Harrison, we're not getting enough return on investment from a top 5 pick from last year. Bills are willing to send like the 30th pick, 31st, 32nd, hey, pick in the draft. And the Cardinals are like, but we need Keon Coleman too in the trade. I think the Bills would say, fine, take him. The same path that got A.D. Mitchell and Mozzie Smith to the Jets is they were throw-ins in big deals the other way. Sauce Gardner goes to the Colts. The Colts send back picks and they throw in A.D. Mitchell, who now is playing very well for the Jets. I think throwing in young players who have underperformed that need a change of scenery, similar to Mozzie Smith in Dallas, is really the best you can hope for at Keon. But it's pretty clear at this point that Keon Coleman and the Buffalo Bills is a bad marriage. And what went into picking him, selecting him, there was a lot of controversy when he was picked. I know that Xavier Worthy was the big talking point of that draft. Ladd McConkey had a massive rookie season that made people wonder about him. I was an A.D. Mitchell guy, and then he wore out his welcome in Indy, but now he's somewhat thriving in New York. It's not like there were any slam dunks there, but Keon Coleman certainly has done the least of everybody there. Everybody else has kind of had moments. Even Worthy last year in the AFC Championship game was the best receiver on the field. Keon Coleman is yet to have those moments that you've been hoping for. Kyle says, sign Alec Pierce yesterday. You're not kidding, Kyle. I think this offseason, Alec Pierce is going to be a massive topic of conversation because I do expect George Pickens to get franchise tagged. It'll be interesting because Jacoby Myers has already signed an extension in Jacksonville. So now you're looking at trade candidates. Is Jalen Waddle available again? Could the Jets make Garrett Wilson available? I wouldn't think so, but maybe. They have a really nice receiving core when you look at Garrett Wilson and then A.D. Mitchell as he's ascending. And then I even like John Mechie, their third receiver, who I think got lost in the shuffle a little bit with Houston. He's a guy I'm always going to root for because of what he dealt with medically coming into the league. So I think the Jets have a nice receiving core there along with Mason Taylor. That's neither here nor there, but Alec Pierce is trending toward being the biggest name available in free agency. And I think we saw this year when he had an actual quarterback for the first time, I believe, in his career, what a dangerous all-around weapon he was. I think for a couple years, it was like, this guy's only a deep threat. He can only go deep. Well, maybe some of that one-trick pony narrative around Alec Pierce was more about the guys trying to get him the ball. And especially when Phillip Rivers came in, Alec Pierce was winning at all 3 levels of the field, making tough contested catches, winning over the middle of the field, but also has that speed to get deep. He would be a fantastic addition to this Bills wide receiver group. And, he's somebody that the way money gets spent in March in this league, I think he could get a massive payday that will probably give you sticker shock when you see what he gets. But he's somebody that's going to be on the Bills' radar. One last thing I want to say before we get out of here, because this game is unique. The win or loss of this game is somewhat irrelevant. It does seem like the Bills are going to win. The Jets seem like they've quit. Really, it comes down to, can the Patriots hold on against the Dolphins? We expect that to happen. Can the Chargers hold on, or the Broncos hold on against the Chargers backups? Again, expect that to happen. Both those games are 1-score games right now, so keep an eye on that. If that does happen, it'll be Bills at Jacksonville in the 3-6 matchup next week. Otherwise, it could be Bills against Patriots, and unless the Bills somehow lose this game, they're going to be the 3 seed. I guess if the Chargers do win in Denver, then the Bills could be knocked down. I said 3 seed. The Bills could fall down to the 7 if the Chargers win. But again, they're playing Trey Lance at quarterback. It does not seem realistic. The last thing I wanted to talk about, the thing right above me, the red helmets. Okay. I was wrong, folks. I don't know if you've been listening to the podcast or whatever, but I have been somebody, admittedly, that when the calls for the red helmets and the old uniforms have come up, I've kind of rolled my eyes at it, because one aspect of the Bills, I appreciate the history of the Bills. I truly do. So please don't take what I say here as anything other than just a quick opinion. I do think some folks in Bills fandom are a little too nostalgic for my liking, and everybody's different. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but sometimes even during the playoff drought, it was like you'd see Thurman Thomas and Jim Kelly and everybody on the sidelines, and it just, on one aspect it was cool, but then there was the whole like Jim Kelly yelling at LaShawn McCoy for not standing for the national anthem, and it's like, you're still here as a fan. You're here as, maybe a member of the organization, but you're not on the team anymore. And it always felt like part of this fan base was so married to the 90s Bills that it never let the Bills progress into the future. Maybe I'm jaded by the fact that they made Marv Levy GM in 2006, and it was just a horrendous decision. He was not capable of doing that job, and it went terribly. But I think the uniform part of it was baked in my brain there. Plus, I like these uniforms. I like the ones that the Bills have now. I think the white helmet is sharp. I don't necessarily love the all blues. I like the white pants with the blue. I do like the all white look on the road. This isn't a bad look either. But man, seeing these uniforms, these red helmets, these red socks in HD, they're nice. They're really nice. I hope the Bills can find a way to add them to the rotation every year and maybe just maybe make them their full-time uniforms going forward. I do like what the Bills roll out in every week, but these red helmets, man, they're something different. Kyle, we're going to give you the last word. I called you and others out on Twitter about the red helmets. The same people who hated on them thought bringing them back now love them. Hey, I hear you, Kyle, 100%. I called myself out on Twitter. I will say, like, Luca and I hope you guys appreciate this. We're never married to our opinions. So I might think one thing today and then see more evidence that tells me the other thing. And I'll say, hey, I was wrong on that. I think the worst thing you can do in sports is be like, well, back in September, I said, I don't even know what I said. The Arizona Cardinals were going to make the playoffs. So I'm going to stick to it, even though they're 4-10 right now or whatever they are in, November. I do think that changing your opinion is a good quality. Hopefully you guys appreciate that about us, but seeing them in HD today, it's been outstanding. But the Bills are rolling right now. The Bills backups are rolling. I don't know really what to get out of this game. It doesn't seem like anybody else is going to play meaningful snaps that matters. Matthew Judon, boy, oh boy, does not look like a savior. He got juked out of his shoes by Brady Cook. But go Bills, get this game to the garage, get the win, I suppose, and get ready for Jacksonville, assuming the rest of the out-of-town scoreboard goes the same. Luca and I will be back on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcast for Bills Chat. And again, that podcast tomorrow is going to be 95% breaking down the playoff matchups, the Bills playoff matchup, talking about that, and maybe 5% talking about the game, and most of that will be about the uniforms in the stadium. So for the final time, probably, this is Bills Chat Halftime at this stadium. It is the final edition of Bills Chat Halftime of the regular season. There will be a playoff version next week. Hopefully there's 4 more episodes of this season, but I want to take this moment to thank any and all of you who took time this season to join me at halftime. I absolutely enjoy doing this show. I enjoy it being part of our Bills Chat rotation. I'll be back next week to talk about halftime against the Jaguars or the Patriots or wherever the Bills wind up. Hopefully, please, please, please be a happy halftime show. And Luca and I will be back on Wednesday to talk about the playoff matchup on Bills Chat Live. Join us in chat, ask us questions, hop in, interact. That's your time to do that. I am Josh McCarty. I will talk to you all next week on the Bills Chat Halftime Show for the playoffs.